My name's Naomi Hansen. I'm the Veterinary Director at North Coast Veterinary Emergency Centre on the Sunshine Coast. And today we're just going to have a little chat about snakes. Snakes are something that come out around this time of year. They're generally in brumation or hibernation during the winter months. And when summer starts to come on, which is about this time of year, they start to become very active. And this time is their mating time and their fighting time, and they can be quite aggressive. In our part of the Sunshine Coast, we usually see brown snakes and black snakes, like the red-bellied black snakes, and they can be quite prevalent. So if you're ever faced with a snake, you should definitely stand still, walk slowly in the other direction, not confront them, because they can be quite nasty. From a veterinary perspective, we do see a lot of dogs that have been bitten by brown snakes and black snakes this time of year. It's not uncommon to find these snakes in the sand dunes or in the long grass around watery areas. And they can be quite aggressive, and some of the dogs we see have been bitten several times, which means that the envenomation is quite severe. From our perspective, we do find that the dogs that are bitten by brown snakes seem to be more severely affected, and they can deteriorate quite rapidly. So if you think that your dog's been bitten by a snake, my piece of advice is to get it to a veterinary centre as quickly as you possibly can. And what I would do is take it to the closest veterinary centre. There are emergency centres on the coast. During the day, a lot of general practitioners would also be able to deal with a snake bite victim. And I think the most important thing is to get your dog to a clinic so it can actually be appropriately assessed and diagnosed. And if a snake has bitten your dog and is caused an envenomation, then we do have anti-venom. In hospital, most clinics will have antivenom, which is actually effective in treating brown snakes and black snakes. If you're not sure that your dog's been bitten or not, I still would advise you to go to a veterinary clinic, because sometimes dogs can appear perfectly normal for a period of up to 12 hours after they've been bitten. So it may be that they've been bitten and then something happens at the time that you may or may not see. And then they come running back to you and they're perfectly normal, and then 8 to 12 hours later, then they start to deteriorate. The good thing is that there's a few tests we can do in that interim period to try and assess if your dog's had a lethal envenomation or enough venom to actually cause a problem. There are a few tests we can do in clinic which are not specific to snake envenomation, but are definitely very suggestive. And if these tests are abnormal, the advice would be to treat your dog with antivenom sooner rather than later. So what does the venom do to your dog? When we look at brown snakes, there's several different types of toxins in the brown snake venom, and it can cause like neurological problems like weakness. It can cause collapse at the time of the bite. Sometimes we'll see muscle damage, and that can cause pain, as well as discoloured urine. Sometimes we see clotting problems, which can cause bleeding. And I think they're the most clinically relevant signs that we see. And I think it's something that the quicker dogs are treated with antivenom, the quicker we can neutralise the circulating venom and stop any of those signs progressing. With the black snakes, we do tend to see more muscle breakdown, so discoloured urine, pain associated with that. They tend to be less likely to bleed, but that can still happen as well. And I think as far as recovery time, most of the dogs that are being bitten by a snake of any description will need a certain time in hospital, usually a minimum of 24 hours, just as far as recovery time goes. And they're pretty critical for that period of time. So if at all possible, it would be better to have your pet in a 24-hour centre where they are monitored all the time. If there's any question as to whether your dog has or hasn't been bitten, or cat, I say dogs a lot, but cats do get bitten as well. A lot of clinics will have a snake venom detection kit, which looks like this, and they keep it in the fridge. And what we can do is do a test on your dog's urine to see if there's actual venom in the urine. And if we get a positive test, we know exactly what type of snake has bitten your dog, and we would use an anti-venom that was appropriate. Now, I think the other question which we get a lot is what to do with the snake. My advice to you is if you see a snake in your yard, call a snake catcher. Don't try and pick it up, don't try and identify it, and generally don't go near it, because I do find that a lot of snakes are incorrectly identified. Not all brown coloured snakes are brown snakes, and not all black coloured snakes are black snakes. Or red belly black snakes, and it's very important that you don't approach snakes unless you're a trained snake catcher. As far as what to do if your dog's been bitten, if you do see the snake, then I feel like if it's still in the area, maybe a photo would be helpful, but I would not advise you to pick up the snake, and I would definitely do not advise you to kill the snake. But I think it's something that you should be cautious about it. Bring your dog to the vet clinic, and if you're worried, you can always call a snake catcher to head out, and actually maybe he can find the snake. I think the take-home message as far as snakes go is there are a lot of them around this time of year. They do hang out in the sand dunes and the long grass, so keep your dog on a lead when you're in long grass areas, around swampy areas, around lakes, and especially on the tracks that go to the beach, because we do see a lot of snakes around the beach areas. Pay attention to any signs that say beware of snakes, because you'll notice in some of the dune areas there are snakes that are like long-term inhabitants of those areas, and I know at Perugian we do have resident brown snakes and black snakes in the sand dunes. So it's definitely a good idea to stay away from that. Keep your dog on a lead. If you're worried, just go and see a vet and get some advice. If your dog is clinically unwell after being bitten by a snake, it is an urgent situation, and my piece of advice is go to the nearest veterinary clinic, which may not necessarily be your vet clinic, but you should probably get attention as soon as possible.